No green pass ready for the guerrillas. Stations to be secured. Vaccine. Undersecretary Sileri, third dose in October for the most fragile. Lack of treatment for other diseases increased deaths, not due to the virus. Rome, the wave of dead fish at Castel Sant'Angelo is a reviews. Welcome to Italy Today's newscast. The no green pass are ready for the guerrillas, and the government has to be secured stations and airports for a high-tension day. The report for us.
No green passes are ready for the guerrillas. Today is expected to be a very high tension, with the rebels ready to block the stations of the main cities and the secured airports. After the protests in the square and the clashes at the gazebos of the political forces, the goal is to stop the railway circulation in the main Italian stations by triggering the alarm of the Interior Ministry, who announced the very hard response against the demonstrators. The plan to deal with this new wave of protests is ready. In fact, security measures have been set up in the main stations in several cities. In Rome, reinforced controls in the main and secondary airports. In Milan, the Porta Garibaldi station was observed. In Genoa, there will be about 100 men from the police forces lined up. The garrison in the main airports was also activated in Puglia, the central Bari station, then Barletta, Molfetta, and Foggia. The danger goes from social networks to the street, where the anger of those who do not believe either in vaccines or in the certificate that will be essential to access essential services is poured out. The case of the chat created on Telegram and called Enough Dictatorship, complete with photos of the Nazi swashbuckler, scares the government. Threats, including death, have involved virologists, trade unions and political figures. In particular to the foreign minister, Luigi Di Maio, with phrases like "another infamous to be executed," "lead is needed or you must die." Throughout Italy, the alert is high. The Turin prosecutor's office is investigating the Telegram channel of the No Vax Enough Dictatorship. In the file, opened against unknown persons, the crimes of incitement to commit a crime aggravated by the purpose of committing terrorist offenses, and the use of IT and telematic tools, and the illicit processing and dissemination of personal data on a large scale, are hypothesized. All this in an increasingly hot climate, after the attacks and threats of recent days against journalists, M5S militants, the virologist Fabrizio Pregliasco and the infectious disease specialist Matteo Bassetti. And precisely, because of the intimidation via social media aimed at the professor of San Martino di Genova, it was discovered in the past few hours that 8 people have been identified, and reported so far by the police for threats via social to the doctor, who on Sunday evening was chased on the street while he went back to his home. In recent months, Bassetti has presented, through his lawyer Rachel De Stefanis, about 20 complaints about the continuous attacks. For the professor of infectious diseases at the University of Genoa, dynamic surveillance was already in place last December. In April, police investigators had identified 2 50-year-olds, one resident in Trieste and one in Cosenza.
The Undersecretary of Health Sileri talked about the third dose of the vaccine that should be given to the most fragile in October. The comments in the report.
About the vaccine, the Undersecretary of Health Sileri replied on TV. Third dose? In October it will be for the most fragile. Also, the order of doctors use caution about a third dose, and replied. We are waiting for studies for the others. The Undersecretary of Health on Canale 5 explains. Progressively, it will be necessary to proceed for those who had the vaccine first. It does not mean third dose for everyone in October. Filippo Anelli, president of FNOMCO, announces. Another reminder today is mainly indicated for the frail, for others we wait. The advisor to the Minister of Health, Walter Ricciardi, said, elderly and frail people find themselves vulnerable again and must be re-protected. The completion of the first vaccination cycle by the entire Italian population is still far from being achieved. Today we have reached 70% of the over 12 immunized against COVID. We must exceed the 80% quota, which is minimal objective to guarantee a little safety to the country, but the optimal one would be 90%, admits Walter Ricciardi, advisor to the Minister of Health. In the meantime, however, the theme of the third dose is also becoming more and more a priority. It has been shown by some studies that it strengthens immunity. When can it be done? Probably from October for less immunocompetent people, such as dialysis patients or other categories of patients, explains Undersecretary of Health Pier Paolo Sileri to Morning News, on Canale 5. Sileri therefore stresses that the new recall will start from the most fragile groups and then, progressively, it will be necessary to proceed with the third dose for those who had the vaccine first. This, however, highlights the Undersecretary, does not mean third dose for everyone in October. And a caution warning comes from Filippo Anelli, president of FNOMCEO, the National Federation of Orders of Surgeons and Dentists. Third dose? Surely it is a reminder that increases the level of immunity. We must understand if it becomes indispensable or not. The third dose today is mainly indicated for the frail, where the immunological level is more compromised. For the others we wait, we look at the studies, he explains, to oppress. We must protect as much as possible to prevent the number of deaths from growing. The invitation is to do the 2 doses. But at the moment the vaccination holds, with a very slight reduction in effectiveness over time, adds Anelli. We are observing that elderly and frail people, vaccinated in January and February, are running out of protection. These people find themselves vulnerable again and need to be re-protected. We must start with them, with the people who were vaccinated first and most fragile, says Ricciardi, explaining that, by the autumn it should be leaving, first of all for these people, and then slowly there is also the problem of the operators' health workers, vaccinated between January and February. On what kind of the third dose will be administered, and Sileri explains, it is possible that going forward the industry will provide us with third doses that will likely be adapted to the variants found in the future.
According to a report of the University of Pavia, in 2021, Italy faced an increase of deaths caused by a lack of treatments due to the COVID emergency. The situation in the next report.
It was clear enough, but now it's written on a paper. We do not die of COVID alone at the time of the pandemic. The stop to hospital treatment, non-urgent visits and screening may have caused in Italy, from the beginning of the emergency phase, a surplus of deaths compared to the numbers that would have been expected in pre-COVID times. A study by the University of Pavia published in the scientific journal Public Health started from ISTAT data on annual deaths and averages over the last 5 years. The consequences of the coronavirus on additional deaths is changing. In 2020 they were over 4 out of 10, in 2021 they are less than 2 out of 10. The rest, 6 out of 10 people in 2020 and 8 out of 10 in 2021, are not attributable to the pandemic virus. Everything starts from a certain fact. Last year there were 750,000 deaths. A number 108,000 higher than the average of deaths between 2015 and 2019. This is the excess mortality, attributable according to the work only 43%, to coronavirus infections. The figures for 2021 is very different. Anna Adone, a university professor of hygiene who coordinated the work, shows a completely different scenario. From January to April we had 192,000 deaths, almost 9,000 more than expected, she says. In this case, the contribution of COVID deaths to mortality was 16%, with regional ranges ranging from 19 to 20% in the north to 14 to 16% in the south, she adds. In the increase in mortality, we find both COVID and non-COVID deaths also caused by lack of treatment. The deaths of COVID cases will continue to drop for various reasons, continues Adone. Unfortunately, the highest risk people died in 2020. Those who survived instead had the vaccine, which protects against serious illness and death. For data analysis, in 2020 there were 1.3 million fewer hospitalizations than in 2019, minus 17%, of which about 620,000 were skipped surgeries. In addition to scheduled hospitalizations, which were 747,011, there are also urgent ones to be cancelled, that is 554,123. This is what emerges from the data of the fourth report of Salutakita on the missed treatments due to the stop for the management of the coronavirus pandemic. The areas most involved were those of general surgery, otolaryngology and vascular surgery. For the cardiovascular field, there was a decrease of about 20% in defibrillator implants, pacemakers and major cardiac surgery. Oncological surgery admissions decreased by 13%, radiotherapy by 15% and chemotherapy by 30%. The decrease in breast cancer hospitalizations was 30% and that of lung, pancreatic and gastrointestinal cancers by 20%. In 2020 there were, compared to 2019, 90 million fewer laboratory services, minus 8 million fewer rehabilitation services, and minus 20 million diagnostic services. Strategies have been put in place for the response to COVID, but much has been done to recover from non-COVID diseases, comments Tonino Assetti, president of the Salutakita Association. Assetti focuses its attention on the extra funds that had been allocated precisely for the recovery of waiting lists. About 67% of the resources allocated in 2020 were not spent by the regions, with percentages of about 96% in the south, 54% in the north and 45% in the center. We need a national recovery plan with a national entity like AGENAS that supports the regions, coordinates them, and, if there are regional incapacities, put in place replacement interventions, he concludes.
Rome is facing a wave of dead fish in the Tiber, near to Castel Sant'Angelo. Experts are doing some analysis to investigate the reasons for the phenomenon. The report from Rome.
Rome is facing a wave of dead fish in the Tiber, but nobody knows who will take them off. AMA, the municipal company for the environment, clarifies that the cleaning of the Tiber, invaded by carcasses, is not included in the service agreement. The region says that the competence is on charge of the municipality of Rome. Meanwhile, the causes are being investigated, and for the biologist, the hypothesis is of the toxic waste spill. Cyclists pedal fast along the quay holding their noses. The customers of bars and restaurants of the Roman summer on the river run away, by giving up their drinks. The dead fish that for a week have covered the surface of the Tiber, from the center to the mouth, up to the coast of Ficine and Fiumicino, not only offer a bleak spectacle. The carcasses of mullets, carp, catfish, which yesterday concentrated in particular under the arches of Ponte Sant'Angelo and close to Ponte Sisto, stink, and strong as well. Therefore the damage is across the board: environmental, health, tourism, economic and urban decor. Last Saturday the ARPA technicians carried out water and dead fish samples, delivering the latter to the ASL ERM1, which in turn charged the Zooprophylactic Institute with the analyses. The results of the double exams are not there yet, but previous experiences already guide experts on the possible causes of the disaster. It is not the first time that certain companies illegally dump their poisons into the river, says Leonardo Tunesi, marine biologist and expert in biodiversity. We could put forward two hypotheses. Before the great rains at the end of August, when the Tiber was dry, someone got rid of its toxic waste that killed the fish. The flood then dragged them to the sea. Or taking advantage of the rains that raised the level of the Tiber and made the waters more turbid, someone spilt toxic substances by counting on impunity. One thing is certain. The dead fish that we see coming to the surface is only the tip of the iceberg. Surely the phenomenon has also affected invertebrates and aquatic plants, in short an entire river habitat that will take a long time to be restored. There is more. Big fish, and I have seen many of them, could have been spawners with thousands of eggs to release. Marco Lombardo, head of the Water Resources Unit of Rome, recalls that last year two similar phenomena occurred again in the summer, in June and July. From the analysis of the samples we made, we found traces of two pesticides, one of which was also banned by law. But the concentrations were not so high as to justify that death. For those episodes I would speak about anoxia. There was a period of drought followed by strong rains that have carried earth and grass into the river. That is a massive organic load degraded by bacteria that has led to excessive consumption of oxygen. The fish died from a lack of oxygen. It must also be said that last year the fish carcasses were in an advanced state of decomposition, and this did not help the analyses. Once again, the state is not good. Now there is the puzzle as to who should clean up.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us. We invite you to subscribe to the Facebook page and follow us again.